think we're live. Hey, welcome to our bi-weekly live. I believe we're live on YouTube and Facebook. I got Sean monitoring the chat and also kind of guiding, making sure I'm not making any big flubs. Unlike his normal job where he's able to edit out all of my mistakes, here on the live you will get raw, unfiltered Dan. Whether that is a good thing or a bad thing, I'll let you be the decider. Got the blue light going on behind me. Still kind of getting over a little bit of a cough. There we go. Get that out of the way. And this week we are mostly going to be hitting kind of market data. We're sitting here at the end of January, and a lot of people are looking at the market going, what should I do? Should I buy? Should I wait? Where's the market going? What's the Fed doing with interest rates? I heard they were raising rates, but I saw them go down. What's the deal with that? There's a lot of uncertainty going on in the market, and what I'm hoping to do is give you some clarity, give you some ideas of where things might go, and then what I like to always do is come back to try and true advice. What are things that no matter what the market is doing, that are wise to do, paying attention. And one of those would be savings. It's always good to have savings. I don't know about you, and Sean probably, especially in the last year, having a little one, understands this probably better than anyone, is that life has a funny way of punching in the face when you don't expect it. There's all these little expenses that creep up with children that you don't expect. They're the most wonderful thing in the universe. But they also can be something times that expenses you don't expect, like a trip to the hospital or medicine that you didn't think, or their friends also have a birthday party and you've got that expense. So tried and true advice, always have a little bit of savings, always be putting a little bit of money aside. So let's jump into market data. I've got kind of some notes here that we're going to go into. We have one question that came in before the live started that we'll try to hit, which is about investing and when to hit investing. If you had the luxury to wait, when would you purchase your next investment property this fall 2024? I believe, pardon me, I answered that in a comment before we started, but we'll dive a little bit into that as well. First and foremost, I'm going to head over here. I'm going to click and open up. And Sean, will you go ahead and do I need to share my screen, or is that something you can do? Okay, beautiful. All right, so I'm going to type in, and the reason I'm going to type it in rather than just automatically bring it up is because I think it's helpful when you can go and look at the research yourself. So blackknightincorporated.com, they have a ton of great information. This is a report, so I'm automatically open up to the PDF, but if you go to Black Knight, let me just show you how to do it yourself. For you data nerds out there that love to look into this stuff, here's Black Knight Incorporated. You go down to go up here to data reports, boom, and you go down to the Mortgage Monitor, boom, and then you go down to the latest release. So obviously this is this last year. If we go into 2022, which is their latest release, October report right here, they'll have some of the most recent data. Boom. Sean, can you see that pretty well? Can I get a thumbs up on there? Fantastic. Now, there is a ton of info in here. Just really quickly, you can kind of see what delinquency rates are for first liens, mortgage rate, delinquencies by severity, how many people are delinquent and by how much. That's important to see. Cures to current, let's see, loans rolling to more delinquent status, and they do a pretty good job of going down here and explaining the details of these charts. But the one that I really want to look at here is this one. So we're going to click on this one specifically. Am I clicking way too hard, Sean? I feel like that's super loud. Is that good? It's a little loud. All right, I'll try to calm it down here on the clickety click. All right, let's see here. A little bit too far. Boom. All right, perfect. So the beauty of this chart is I think it gives us an immediate snapshot of what does it mean to be a buyer in today's market. Whether you were in 1981, 91, 2001, 2011, or 21, or today, you are always comparing what does it cost to rent versus what does it cost to buy. Okay, and to a certain degree, You compare what you heard your friends did the other day. But after a certain period of time, that's the decision you have in front of you, regardless of what interest rates are doing, and where you feel like rents are unfair. Those are the two. In every marketplace, every rental marketplace and every purchase marketplace is a little bit different. When we're making these value propositions in our little local economy and our little household budget, or big household budget, if you have a big household budget, you're trying to decide, okay, well, what I want to rent is, let's just say $2,500. But what I want to purchase is also $2,500. So I have to, if those are perfectly equal, I'm looking at what are the benefits of buying versus what are the benefits of renting. There are benefits of renting. That's a real thing there. You don't take on the risk if the property value goes down. You don't take on the risk if the property starts having damages. That's all on the homeowner. If you have a job opportunity that comes up in a different market, you can easily switch over into that pretty quickly. Whereas home ownership, you have to find a renter or turn around and sell that property, which there's more risk there. But if you don't want your landlord telling you what kind of dog breed that you can have, or telling you what colors you can or can't paint, or adding something or taking away something, or if you want to capture the appreciation of value over time, pardon me, get a little sip here. Much better. Home ownership has its benefits, and there's two things. If you've ever listened to me before, there's two things that I talk about. One is ROI versus ROL, return on investment, which is purely numbers based, and return on life, which is about more of enjoyment. We do this sometimes when we're going out to eat. We definitely go for the extra piece of cheesecake. Does that have any ROI when it comes to our health? Probably not, but it does have a lot of ROL, return on life, because cheesecake is amazing. Same thing when you're making improvements to your house. Sometimes going through and adding something really nice in your bathroom, let's just be absurd here and say $100,000 steam shower. Okay, well, if that's what brings you joy, and that's what brings you relaxation at the end of the day, maybe that's something that you can justify making that purchase. But when you go to resell the house, unless it's a multi-million-dollar property, it's unlikely, very unlikely, that you're going to get back the full amount that you spent into that bathroom back on resale. It's just highly unlikely. So back to purchase versus rent. We're looking at rents. Rents have a tendency to go up over time, and you're comparing it against what is the average payment. I'm so sorry about this, folks. And back to what I kind of said, if rents are $2,500 for what you're wanting, and purchasing something equivalent is also $2,500, that's equal. But what if renting is $3,500 and buying is $2,500? Okay, well, it cost me $1,000 more. I'm maybe pushed way more towards the purchase than I would be otherwise. If it's the flip-flop, if it's $3,500 to purchase but $2,500 in rent, well then, depending on the individual, it might be a little more weighted towards the rent. So this is why I really like this chart. When I'm looking at this chart, what I see here on the blue line, is I see a line that tells me what percentage of the average income does it take to buy the average home? I'll say that one more time. What is the percentage of the average income to buy the average home at that point in time? And so when I hear things on TikTok and Instagram of the gloom and doom trolls of it's more expensive than it ever has been in history, no, you're wrong. You're full of shit. You're not right. That's not how these things work. Is it more expensive than relative normally, recent history? Absolutely. But I'm sorry, your parents or grandparents, when they were buying back in 1981, were paying 55% of what the average income was to buy a home. So I'll let you decide at home whether they were better with their money or not than the current crowd. But that's the reality. Now, did it precipitously fall off and did it continue to fall down? Sure, absolutely. But here's something I want to kind of point out. This green line being the interest rate, the average interest rate. And what did the average interest rate do for effectively nearly 50 years? It did nothing but fall. And recently it went really down. But I want to kind of point out this separation here between interest rate and the average payment. Why did this happen? And you can see that it started right around 2000 and ended kind of in 2006, kind of late 2006, early of 2007. Well, if you've ever watched the movie The Big Short, you understand that's when the market kind of crashed. And you can kind of say, even though interest rates actually went down and then leveled off for many, many years, you can see that it kind of was between the high 4s to the low 6s for about 6 years. That was average. For 6 whole years, it floated between that time right there. And what did the average payment to income ratio do? It went up, which means that even though interest rates stayed the same, the cost of homeownership went up. It became less affordable over time. And then around 2006, well, you hear of the crash. And I want people to understand that crash doesn't happen overnight. The crash from 2006 or maybe early 2007 happened in our market, and we'll actually go some of our local market data. It took 5 full years for that really to correct. And I apologize if this stuff is boring to you. This stream is going to be super, super boring. If you're a big data nerd like me, if you like understanding the numbers, if you like trying to really see behind the curtain on housing, this can be really, really helpful. So what did it do, right, for multiple years after that? From 2006 all the way to 2012, it fell. And what's really fascinating here, I'm so sorry, Sean, I know you have to listen to my coughing too. What's really fascinating here is you can see right around here, if I remember when I looked this up on the charts, this was about 17%. For almost a decade, from 2011 to 2021, for almost a decade, housing was more affordable than it had been in the last 50 years. What's really interesting, what this chart doesn't show, is that housing size also went up during this time. The average home as it was being built in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, late 2000s, early 2020, these homes for the most part gained more square footage. These homes for the most part were actually using better building practices on new construction, not worse, in most cases. And so homes were becoming cheaper, and you were getting better homes in general, especially if you're buying new construction. And so you can kind of see it went up a little bit, but for almost a decade, it was the cheapest it had been for nearly 50 years. So what happens when interest rates go up? The fastest they've gone up in about 50 years, right? The only time we've ever seen that big of a hike was back here in the late 70s, early 80s. So, housing affordability skyrockets because not only did prices go up in some markets 25, 35, 40%, but you jack the interest rates up from the lowest they've been to the highest they've been, and this kind of makes sense. What's interesting, right? So I want to kind of show you guys something here. Let me go over to our RAIN website here. So we're going to look actually at local data. You can see my username. You won't be able to see the password there. Oh, well, it didn't work for me. Let's try to go back again. I lied. Agent login. Sign in. Okay, beautiful. All right, so we're going to go down here to Domus Analytics. And we're going to go down to Market Insights Dashboard. And we've got local data. All right, so, right, you can kind of see here's home prices in our market. So this is our MLS. And for those who are trying to understand what is Virginia Beach or what is the Hampton Roads area, and if I show you that, so we'll zoom out here. What's interesting, so there's the state line right there from North Carolina to Virginia. And our MLS kind of hits ish. Let me zoom out just a little bit more. Right out here is outside of Franklin, just north of Williamsburg, kind of Gloucester, this section right here. So that includes all of this area. And with all of that area, we have about 30-ish thousand transactions that goes on. So what did housing do from 2004 to 2006 during that period of time? And you can see that we had a very aggressive run-up, actually more aggressive than recent history, right? So let's go back here, and we talked about in the last couple of years since 2020. And I remember this pretty vividly because March is my birthday. And I remember I had planned to go out to Hank's trading station, It's a great place on Collie Avenue. If you haven't been, if you're not local yet, and you're looking at moving into the area in Norfolk, that is a fantastic outdoor venue. They have things like cornhole and darts and ping pong, all kinds of like outdoor games. And they very regularly host things like trivia night. So there's the office trivia night. It's supposed to be for my birthday, and they did the whole 2 weeks to slow the spread. So let me go over, and I want to show you something that I think is really, really interesting. Go to active listings. How many homes are actively for sale at any point in time, right? So we'll get to COVID here. We're gonna go backtrack to 2004. Actually, before I do that, real quick. All right, Dan brain moment here where I'm ping-ponging all over the place. All right, so in any product or service in any point in period of time. Hey, buddy, good to see you, babe. Love you, Dad. Love you too, man. It's my 12, soon-to-be 13-year-old there. So in any product or service, this is Yeti mugs to getting your lawn mown to Michelob Ultra to a Gerber knife, whatever it is that you're gonna buy, product or service. It is always a reflection of supply versus demand. That's just the reality. Supply versus demand. Okay, and if you are if you increase the amount of buyers in a marketplace, or if you decrease the amount of supply, the amount of homes available, your little alarm should be telling you that prices are going to go up. If you decrease the amount of buyers and you increase the amount of homes that are available, your little alarm bell should tell you that prices are going to come down. Okay, and the intersection of those. Now, it can be a mix and mingle. You could have a decrease in supply and a decrease in buyers, and basically prices stay flat if it's equal, all things being equal. So when we see this run up here from 2004 to 2007, your alarm bell should say, oh, either buyer demand went up drastically or supply went down. And so let me go back over. I kind of already gave you the answer here. Active listings. Well, what happened to listings during this period of time? There we go. Listings quadrupled from a low of 3,100, let's just say 4,500, up to 16,000. 4 times increase of listings that were on the marketplace. And so you go, wait a minute, Dan, I thought prices went up drastically during that period of time. And I go, yeah, that should tell you something. That should tell you how terrible the underwriting practices were during this period of time, because demand was so crazy strong that even though we had a quadrupling of inventory, that prices still went up this fast. So when people tell you that this market is the exact same market of 2006, 7, and 8, they are wrong. They are not just wrong, they are dead wrong. And I can guess that some of these charts probably look different from San Diego to Los Angeles to Colorado, that type of thing. Sure. But for our market, I can tell you that listings quadrupled during this period of time. For the people that are on, does that totally make sense, or did that not make sense? I want to make sure that I'm explaining that clearly. Let me look over at my notes here. Yep, cool. All right, so a couple things I want to kind of point out about the market here. One, you should notice, hey, wait a minute, I'm seeing a little bit of a cycle kind of go on here. Are you following? Any questions? Thank you, Sean. You should see a cycle going on here, and that should make sense. Well, because, let me go over here, and I'll just, instead of telling you, I'm going to show you. Well, how many settled sales, happen every single month? All right, give it a second to load. That should be it, okay? And you can see that in any year, there are more sales that happen during summer than winter. Here's January. Here is summer. Here is January. Here's summer. And you can see that cycle happens every single year without fail, right? And so when they raise interest rates, right, you can see that year over year, we've had more and more sales happen every single year since basically 2011. One of the things that you'll hear is like, oh my God, how do you go every year up, right? How does that make sense? Because if are just more people moving, what's going on there? So let's go over real quick. I want to show you active listings. How many homes are available for sale? Because one of the things I think sometimes people gloss over or don't necessarily pay attention to is just because a house goes on the market doesn't necessarily mean that it sells. That it sells. Sean's gonna have to give me like a hand signal every now and then when I do a Danism of a mixed word here. All right, so we go back to 2004, right? We had that quadrupling. And you go, okay, well, Dan, what's a balanced market look like? Okay, if what is it doesn't necessarily favor buyers, doesn't necessarily favor sellers, because I can see, hey, the last couple of years, it's definitely been a seller's market. Everybody knows that, and we've been low amount of active listings. Okay, so if you wanted to know that, if I had one metric that I could follow, and only one, it would be months of supply. And the reason for this is because it takes supply and demand perfectly in context of one another. Shoot, we're relocating to the area. How do I expand on that? Worried about the market. Gigi, it depends on the price point. It depends on what you're looking at doing. Depends on when you're gonna buy. Depends on what your budget is. I don't think, in general, that we're going to see the same market that we've had over the last couple of years. You have to understand that in a lot of ways, this market that we've seen here, I'll zoom in a little bit. This market that we've seen, of 2020 and 2021, it's unlikely we're going to head back here. The Fed is just unlikely to lower rates or get us down into a position where the rates are so low. Let me go back over here to this. You can kind of see right here. This was the beginning of COVID right here. And what did they do? They lowered rates to the lowest they had been in for forever, right, in the last 50 years. I do not foresee a market where we are in 2.5%, 2.75% territory. When you lower the cost of money down to the lowest it's been in 50 years, you have what I like to call stupid money. There's a lot of people that are in the market that maybe shouldn't be there. Now, that may sound like a jerk thing to say, but you have people that maybe in 3, 4, 5% territory could only afford a $400,000 or a $500,000 house, but because interest rates have been so low that they are now in 5, 6, 700 territory. Okay, and anytime you increase the buyer pool, you increase demand, which makes it more competitive. Okay, and so what's really fascinating here is what you see is. And I'll kind of go back. I'll backtrack a quick second. So Sean, remind me to come back to months of supply. We'll come back to it in just a second. Let me go back over here to active listings. Wait for it to load. There we go. Cool. Here is March right here of 2020. Okay. So I'll just kind of give you the where I was headed there. Gigi is 2012-ish to 2018 was kind of a balanced market for us. Didn't necessarily favor buyers, didn't necessarily favor sellers. What's interesting is during this period of time, the average days on market was normal to be 45 or almost 60 days. It's abnormal for it to be like 4 days on market. So in March of 2020, back to me complaining about my birthday, well, when you have half the country that believes COVID doesn't exist and the other half that thinks it's the worst thing on the planet Earth, I'm obviously exaggerating a little bit there, you get half of those people not putting their house on the market, right? You see the cyclical nature, winter, summer, winter, summer, winter, summer. This is the normal ebb and flow of the seasons here. But when you take half of the people and they don't want to put on the market, even the people who probably didn't think COVID was nearly as bad, probably were like, you know what, we're just going to sit tight. Also during this time, the Feds lowered interest rates to the lowest they've ever been. So a lot of people were like, shoot, let me refinance and stay in my property. And now I'm in a position where it's like, why would I ever leave my property if I have 2.25% interest rate, right? So you can see, again, the cyclical nature kind of kicking in here, but we're still at incredibly low inventory. It is not uncommon for a lot of my clients to be like, man, I cannot seem to find what I'm hoping to find. It's difficult for me to find a property that I'm looking for. So you have these active listings going down. If you remember on the other chart, we showed a chart of people, the number of people moving or number of settled sales went up during this period of time. And so you ever heard like, it's like, well, if you eat like 200 extra calories or 300 extra calories, any specific questions about that? Okay, thanks, Sean. That if you overeat a little bit over a long period of time, that's where you gain weight, right? And so what I would say is that the market can be very similar. You don't necessarily feel it right away, right? Even though the market was becoming more and more competitive here, I would argue that the people who bought in 2019 weren't necessarily looking at this data, but they did have about 0.25% lower listings, right? It was a little bit more competitive. It was a little bit less inventory. But because it's been more drastic recently, that's where the pain has been felt. If you put a toad in a pot on the stove and slowly crank up the heat, it'll sit there till it dies. But if you crank it up really quickly, that's when it'll hop out. Rick, today there are, where we go, 345 homes available in Virginia Beach, not under contract, all price ranges. That's for lower than. Yeah. Rick, I like it when you jump on, man. So it's fascinating. I think this is really, really helpful to understand that the amount of listings has gone down really dramatically. And a lot of the current buyers in today's marketplace is and it's going to take a while to get back. I would totally agree with you, Rick. I think, and the reason I brought this up from the very, very beginning is I think that housing unaffordability is going to be a continual dinner table conversation. It's going to be a conversation in politics, making housing affordability. Equity being part of that conversation is probably going to be part of a political conversation for a long period of time, because the majority of statistics around home ownership, around default rates, around people who own their house outright in cash, the amount of equity people have in their homes is generally favoring not having a bunch of distressed sales. You have to have distressed sellers to have distressed sales. And that's something that I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand, because I'm working with quite a few investors right now. And sometimes they'll say, well, Dan, do you think the seller will take this? I'm like, you can write whatever offer you want to write, right? I'm here. If you tell me to write that offer, I'll write that offer. I don't really get it. It didn't hurt my feelings any to offend somebody. But the seller still has to accept the offer. And if they just look at it and go, well, look, average days on market's still 25. I'm only on day 14. I'm going to wait around. And you know what? I got plenty of equity. I'm sitting on some savings. I might as well just lower it only 5% and wait another 30 days before I do, make any big decisions there. How far in advance do I need to start actively looking? When I moved to Tennessee, you had to find a house before hit the market. Is it that extreme there? I would say no. Can you tell me what particular price point you're at, and maybe I can show you exactly what's going on at that price point now. What I would tell you in general, so like I have a couple that's moving from Alaska to here, and part of our conversation when we did a consult was, okay, well, do you have to sell your house there to buy here? How much money are you coming in with? What price point are you at? How long, if you're going to come here and rent for a little bit or do a temporary rent, how much money do you have to potentially be in a position where you pay a little bit of rent and a little bit of your mortgage at the same time? Because much like any buying anything else that's amortized, when you make the purchase, you don't actually start making payments for 45 to 60 days, depending on the structure. And so if you have a little bit of cash savings there, you might be able to absorb a little bit more. Or how risk averse are you? If you're the type of person who wants to have everything lined up and perfectly done, well, you may just want to start that process a little bit earlier. If you're under 350, are we looking at 2-bedroom, 3-bedrooms, 4-bedrooms? What kind of school district do we want to be in? Because if you wanted to be in a very specific area and a very specific house, and you and I look at all the properties that are available, and let's just say that's slim pickings, well, we kind of go, all right, well, it might make sense for me to start a hair bit earlier than trying to just nail everything down in 30 days. Because what if the home inspection comes back and it's garbage and you can't get the seller to negotiate the way you want them to negotiate, and you need to go back out and start your search on the next property, and it takes you another 2 weeks to find the property, and then you have a home inspection, and it just kind of depends on what risk tolerances you have. I feel like I got a little off track on where I was at, Sean. Where was I at?
I was gonna chime in here and ask. Do you have like a general, just when do you think people should start that process in the current market?
Oh, yeah, great question, Sean, or good way to bring that back. Yes, I would say, obviously, so if you watch the channel for any period of time, you know that I do on the real estate side, my wife runs the mortgage side. I would start the mortgage conversation probably before you even talk to me, 6 months out. One, you want to make sure that you have your head fully wrapped around what loan product you're going to use, how much closing costs are going to really be. Because if you understand that closing costs are, say, 3% at whatever purchase price you're at, and then you come and you say, hey, Dan, how competitive is the market? Are people getting full closing cost assistance? Are they getting none? Are they getting 1%? How much are they actually getting? And that getting them and not getting them is a real impact on your world. Then you need to start, and you're like, oh shoot, I need to plan to pay those out of my own pocket rather than getting them covered. You want to have that conversation earlier, not later. You don't want to find that out 30 days or 60 days before you're trying to move. So I would say 6 months is probably the smart version. And if you want to have that conversation even a full year out, I don't have any problem doing that. If you want to hop on the 30 minutes and we walk through what your exact scenario is, and we kind of give some advice around that, that's totally fine. Totally easy to do. Danger Rouge. I like that name. Let me grab a little sip here. All right. So housing affordability, I think, is going to continue to be a dialogue. You can see that this only goes up to the end of last year, obviously, because I'm pulling the October report. Rates have actually come down a little bit, and it's more around like 35.5 or 36%. Now, I follow a couple different mortgage people, and they think rates are going to slowly come down throughout the middle of the year. The Fed has basically said, with relative certainty, there's never ever something set in stone, but they plan on doing about a 0.25% rise at this next meeting. I guess it's next week, and then it's likely they're going to do another 0.25% rise the next meeting, and then they're going to kind of reevaluate where inflation data is going, and do they need to continue to rise? Are they going to hold off and level it and just kind of give it 6-9 months and just really see where the economy goes? Because much like what we were kind of going on over here is, some of these things are very, you need to kind of see what the full cycle does, right? And so you want to know, let me go back over here. Oh, not median days on market. That's not what I wanted. Median sales price. You kind of want to know what the real impact has been on a full cycle. You can't always tell on a month-to-month or even a 60-day basis what a 1% rise actually does, because the market takes some time to respond to that. Interest rates is another good example. Let me go back over here real quick. Is how long? So how long you see this drop right here, and it kept going, but it took a little bit of time. But at some point, the market said, "Oh, this is the new normal." At some point, if rates end up staying around 5.5 or even 6%, again, this is a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 year span of time where it hovered around that. If it about a full year goes in and rates don't move at all, that becomes the new norm. It just does, and that's what you end up getting used to. You kind of look back and go, man, shit. My brother bought a house 5 years ago and he had just a crazy rate. I wish I could get that, but that's at some point it becomes the new normal. Sean, did I miss a question there? I saw, let's see, how far in advance? I'd say 6 months. Danger Rouge, just to confirm there, is it that extreme there? I don't know what they actually, I'm not looking at their MLS data there in Tennessee from city to city, but I think here at least, if interest rates stay around where they're at, and I think there are a couple reasons to believe that even if the Fed raises up a 0.25% here soon, that rates actually could stay exactly where they're at, and I'll tell you why here in a second. That as we head towards summer, that's when the real demand will start to show its head, and depending on what inventory does, right, will kind of give us an indication. I think it's likely that we will still be in a seller's market, but I just don't think that it necessarily will be what we were for the last 2 years, simply because 3.25 is different than 5.25. You've got less buyers in the marketplace, period. And back to that idea where I said stupid money, there aren't people that are just like, you know what, let's just go out and get the nicest house, or the market's crazy, let's just sell our house and see what we can get. That there's just less and less of that. People that are moving right now are people that, for the most part, have to move or need to move, or like, man, we've really been saving up. Like I have 2 cash buyers right now that interest rates don't really affect them because they can buy in cash, and they're looking for something that they can basically retire in. So, and that's just that. Obviously, they're not affected by interest rates because they just don't care. It's not affecting them at all. So I think before I went off on my rabbit trail, I was covering months of supply. Is that correct, Sean?
That's what I remember.
Yep. Okay. All right. Well, normal day in rabbit trails. If I missed your question, or if I didn't fully answer it, please put that back into the chat, and I'll do my best to answer that the best I can. All right. So if I'm trying to understand where the market is going at any point in time, right? And this could be an inventory of 20,000 and an inventory of 4,000. I want to know what is supply divided by demand. And that's why I love this metric. What is supply divided by demand? So if I had 1,200 homes, or I'll just use 12. So sorry, guys. If I had 12 homes available in a marketplace and 2 homes per month, or currently the rate of absorption, the amount of homes that are currently being purchased per month is 2, well, 12 divided by 2 is 6. And 6 just so happens to be, I did the math, a neutral market. Doesn't necessarily favor buyers, doesn't necessarily favor sellers. The higher you go above that, the more and more of a buyer's market it becomes. Okay, this is not an on-off switch. It's sort of like the idea of trust. Trust isn't like on and off. It's like, at what degree of trust do you have? Well, my degree of trust for my son to drive a Lamborghini is really low. The degree of trust for my son to mow the lawn, 5 out of 10. He's decent at it, and I don't have to watch after him. And he, pays a decent amount of attention. But if I was going to take him to $1 million, lawn to mow the lawn, I'd be like, well, maybe he's not necessarily the best, person to do that. So it's not necessarily a buyer's market. It's not necessarily a seller's market. It's how much so. So common sense would say, well, if I have 18 months of supply, it would take 1.5 years for everything that's currently on the market to sell. So, that's why I love this metric, is it doesn't really matter how much supply there is. It's taking supply in contrast of the current rate of demand. Okay. And then I go back down here, right? Because I remember saying to a client, I think in early 19, yep, that makes sense. I was like, man, we're around 4 months of inventory. Looks like we're headed down into the 3s here. We're headed into the seller's market. This is the best market, and I said this is the best market that we've had in over a decade. This is fantastic. I just saw a house the other day that had 3 offers on it, and they only paid 1% closing costs. And I was kind of excited. I was like, this is awesome. All right, so let me go back over here, and I want to kind of drive home this point here. Active listings, right? What happened during this period of time? Active listings went from, in March, which was already kind of low, which we just saw, and it plummeted. At that exact same time, interest rates went down. And so it really shouldn't be all that surprising, if you kind of understand the basics of supply and demand, why market prices went up the way that they did. Here we go. Cool. All right. Any questions? Housing affordability has been a topic for 20 years in Virginia. Yeah, but I would say that Virginia Beach in particular is probably one of the more affordable markets in comparison to some of the other East Coast cities. Now, when we're looking at housing prices and compared to incomes, average incomes, Norfolk actually becomes one of the not as affordable. There's a burden rate. I don't want to get too far into that territory and off topic too much. All right, let me look at my notes. All right, Fed rates. Okay, so I want to really quickly, because we can come back to this. I want to show you. Let's see here. How do there you go. Every day is a great day to buy. Yeah, I think I mostly agree with you. Is there some potential if how do I want to say this? Timing the market can be tough, and unless you are an expert at it, and unless you just can put aside all other personal things, which most people can't. Like even if you can look at the data and go, well, maybe I should wait 3 years to buy, or most optimally would be wait to 3 years to buy. Some people kind of go, all right, well, I still need a place to live, and I still think that buying is better than not buying. And I would say that like, yeah, as long as you plan on owning the property for probably a minimum of 5 years, but preferably for 10, the data tends to support that buying long term is going to benefit you. If you want like a really cool nerdy website, Michael Blue Jay, help if I could spell. I feel like I should give this guy more credit because I've used this with a lot of different clients. Here we go, buying versus renting. michaelbluejay.com/house/rent versus buy. This guy has a crazy good, you can tell I'm a Toyota person, very nice. You can tell this guy has a crazy good calculator of the perfect analyzation, or as perfect as you can get, of analyzing what the sale versus renting, right? And so if I'm looking at a $300,000 purchase and the renting options that are similar are $2,000, and I'm putting 5% down, my mortgage interest rate is well, it's lower right now, so let's just say 6.25. Am I able to get the seller to pay the closing costs and I increase the purchase? Do I have PMI? What's my credit score? What are the closing costs? What am I estimating for maintenance? If you want a perfect analytical approach of whether it makes sense to rent versus buy, it says, all right, well, based on these things, right, with rent inflation, I think 3.5% is a good guess for right now. It might actually be a little bit higher over the next couple of years. What are the what's the rate of return I'm getting on my investments? What are my capital gains, right? And I go, cool. Based on all the available data here, it will make sense at year 4. Now, you may decide that depending on your scenario, you go, you know what? If I broke even at year 3, I'd totally be okay, right? Because again, go back to ROL. You just may not want to deal with a landlord, okay? So this is a great website if you want just to go by the numbers. All right. Shoot. I was going to cover something else here. Foreclosure data. All right. So this is just something I think is really kind of interesting. When people talk about the foreclosure quadrupling in the last couple of years, I think what's really important to understand is that foreclosures in general, since the moratoriums have been lifted, they have increased, but they still not have gotten back to pre-pandemic levels. Okay. Now, some of these things are a lagging indicator. The average, I think it actually shows in here. Let me see. It does. Cool. The average length of time from when something starts to complete a foreclosure is nearly 900 days, almost 3 years in some ways, or a little less than 3 years, but you get what I'm trying to say here. Almost 3 years. That is a long, long period of time. And so even if we have a wave of unemployment that comes up, it's going to take a while for these foreclosures to hit the market. And what you can see is even since the moratoriums have been lifted, the numbers actually have not returned to pre-pandemic numbers on completed foreclosures. A lot of banks have made big efforts to keep people in their houses and to restructure loans, to add it onto the loan. Heck, the 40-year loan product came out during this period of time simply so that if you could restructure it and keep somebody in their house, that you could do that. So it's important to understand that 2005, 2006, 2007, those foreclosure numbers, and then they continue to rise for a couple of years, we're just nowhere near those. I can tell you because I just bid on an REO property with an investor client of mine, and the property had like 5 offers on it. It's still, because there's just so little and demand is still decently high, it's difficult to get a quote unquote deal, if you will. All right, close that out, close that out, close that out. So what I think can be super helpful, and what I might end up doing here is let me go into the MLS here, and I think was it Gigi or Dangarouche that said he had a budget of 350. Sean, do you remember?
Yeah, it was Dangarouche.
Yep. All right, so if I go in here and I type in, and I'm just going to put in the range, so 350, and I'll put a 50 above and 50 below, 3 to 400. All right, and I want to see, active and pending. Where do those 10 homes tend to show up? Let me zoom in a little bit. Can you see this really well, Sean, or do I need to adjust that at all?
I think that's good.
Okay, come on, I want you to show me active listings. Show me the little dots. Ooh, a little far in. All right, perfect. All right, so if I was going to point you in a couple different directions, I think one would right be here. I always butcher the name of this, Aragona Village. But effectively, this section between Haygood, Independence, and the highway, I think this is a great little section to pay attention to. If I was also going to give you another one, Windsor Woods would be a good area to pay attention to. Chimney Hill, Green Run, Salem would be a decent area. You can kind of see where these clusters are. But I want to show you something here. So let's look at Chimney Hill. So I'm going to kind of pick this little section here, and we're going to do this. So actually right there, and there. All right, so I'm going to go over here to criteria, and let me get rid of the price points because I want to see everything in that neighborhood real quick. And I want to show everything that's sold. And
this is you looking at things right
now? So this is active properties that are currently under contract and the last 6 months have sold. So when I'm trying to do an analysis like this, and I'm trying to see what's kind of normal in this neighborhood, right? So first I see, okay, I've got a decent amount of options in this neighborhood. Let me see what this neighborhood tends to do in general. I want to look between 50 and 150 matches. It's going to give me some good data. So if I go over here to results, all right, cool, Green Hill, Chimney Run. That's all right. We'll have a little bit of overlap. That's not a big deal. But it's going to give us an idea of what this little section of town does. So let me go over to export. Let me go over to focus first, export that data. Let's go back over here. And what I would say is back to results. And we're going to look mostly at South Central Virginia Beach, so 47. All right, so over here, we're going to deselect all, and we're going to go down to section 47.
Behind the scenes in the daily life of a realtor.
I mean, it's boring, but if you're trying to understand how to do pricing, there's kind of three things that influence pricing in general, in my opinion. One is what's going on nationally, interest rates, what's going on in the news, what the Fed's doing, because this affects the psychology of the buyer to a degree. What the interest rates being low versus high affects how many buyers are in the marketplace. And then we want to look at market insights. We want to see what's the days on market, what's the average list price to the contract ratio, what are the months of supply in this area and this price point. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of multifamily and land. I'm going to look at mostly detached and attached. And then I'm going to look at between 300 and 400, right? What's going on in this section of Virginia Beach, specifically in this $100,000 chunk. I want to see what's going on. All right, boom. All right, so here we go. We're going to close that out. We're going to go over and we're going to look at my top three. So top three are months of supply. Boom, we're at 1.6. When we were looking at the entire market, what did we saw? We saw 2.1. So this is a more competitive area and price point of the market than other price points, right? All right, so and is that data going up or down? Well, it looks like it's going up, but we are headed towards summer. It wouldn't surprise me if it levels off and comes back down just a little bit. Remember, these changes have a tendency to take a little bit of time. Next one I'm going to look at is median days on market. Okay, well, the average days on market right now is 21, and you can kind of see it's leveled off right here. It's kind of come off and leveled off. We have 21 for 2 months in a row. All right, so average days on market, three weeks. Right? If the house has been on the market for less than 3 weeks, and let's just say they have one other offer, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to negotiate down, because especially if they have another offer. If they don't have any other offers, they may entertain something less. But this is telling us what's going on in the marketplace. And then lastly, I want to know what's going on with, go back up here. What is the average percent of list price received? Out of all the contracts that got under contract, what was the percentage of the list price that they received as they got under contract? And I can see 100.1, right? So out of every deal that's happened, and I can kind of see what that looks like. So let me go over to settled sales. 35 out of the last 35 contracts that happened that month, it was 100.1, right? And you can kind of see the cycle here. But if I go over there, I can see that in this price point, there's a decent amount of competition. And we had a high, right? Interestingly enough, during the summer of 2021, it kind of came down during the winter, but then it kind of peaked right back up at the early of 2022. A lot of this was FOMO, by the way. You typically wouldn't see this cycle come up that quickly, but a lot of people saw interest rates rising. But what's really fascinating is here, March of 2022, at this price point in this area, the average contract to list price ratio was 104.1, and it came down a little bit. But now we're sitting here at 100.1. Really quickly, before I go into this pricing of this neighborhood, because I think this is really kind of interesting and important, let me recycle this. What people have a tendency to think is that just because the average contract to list price ratio is below 100% means that the market is dropping. That is not the case. So if I go over here and I look at, I'm just going to hit refresh because sometimes it freezes up on me. Perfect. Okay. So let me go back over here. Right, remember when I said 2012, 2018, sort of a neutral market, and you saw how the market was getting more and more competitive? Well, what did the average list price to, or average percent of, golly damn, stumbling all over my words here, average percent of list price received slowly went up, right? And the cycle happens winter to summer. You can see the summer to winter cycle. But 96.9 to 97.4, a low of 97.1 and a high of 98. And it slowly went up. And then you can see, boom, right when COVID hit and the competition went up high, that you see the averages here. And now we're back down to 99.2. But during these years, from 2012 to 2018, the average appreciation year over year was somewhere between 2 and 5%. Even though the average contract to list price ratio was at 97.5, for the entire year, we still saw appreciation during that year. Something that's important, I think, to understand. All right, so we're looking at this section of Virginia Beach back over here. If you're coming back or you're just getting on, what we're looking at is, what does Chimney Hill tend to do, or a little bit of Green Run, okay? And obviously, if I was looking at a specific property, I might get a little bit more accurate. I might cut out this section and might cut out this section. That's fine. I'm just trying to drive home some kind of general points here. All right, so I got 80 homes. Actually, that's going to bother me, so I'm going to do this. Sean's going to laugh at me because my brain for accuracy is bugging me here. All right, so let me go back over all. We're going to export. If you're an agent, by the way, this is data, or there's a piece of software that I use called visual pricing software, and that's something that you can easily use yourself. It's something you have to pay for, though. All right, let me go down here. And I'll share my screen here. Actually, let's see here. I'll do this. Where's share screen? And window. Okay, and boom. All right, can you see that now, Sean?
Yep, we can see that.
All right, perfect. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to import that data. And yep, that's what I want. Boom, perfect. All right. Now I'm going to go in and manually select all of these properties. Some of this is a little bit of an iterative process, so you have to bear with me here. All right, let's go ahead and select all of those, and let's create a new scattergram. Create, replace. And thank you, computer. So very sweet of you. All right, cool. Sean, do you know if there's a drawing tool in this that I can use, like a screen drawing tool?
Not that I know.
Well, bummer. Okay, well, you're just gonna have to use my my marker here. All right, so the software automatically plots this line right here, right? And this, it calls it fair market value. I don't really like that term. But the idea here is, all right, blue are solds, green is properties that are for sale. Some of these have home inspection contingencies on them, so they might actually be under contract. And then you've got properties under contract. Actually, let me go back and check real quick. I can take a look real quick at the results. And it looks like to me, about half of the green ones have a home inspection contingency on them right now. All right, boom. All right, so this is kind of the middle of the market. And so when I'm analyzing this, when I'm trying to understand what's going on in the marketplace, let me throw a shape in and do this. I can see that this kind of is the top of the market. And show another shape in here. Boom. And this right here tends to be the bottom of the market. And so whether we're looking at, I don't care what neighborhood or what section of town that we're looking at, what we can see here is that there is here's square footage and here's price point. And if I'm looking at 1,300 square feet, 1,500 square feet, 1,700 square feet, 2,000 square foot, in this section, there's always a relationship between price point and square footage. And you have a low of the neighborhood and a high of the neighborhood. Now, are there some outliers down low? Sure. They're probably really bad inside, part of an estate sale, a short sale, foreclosure, something along those lines where it caused it to sell well below. But 98% of the properties fall within this category right here. And so I go, all right, well, within this section of Chimney Hill, I go, all right, it's pretty normal. It's pretty normal for things to fall between 215, 220,000 and a high of somewhere around $360,000. So if I see something priced way up here, I kind of go, well, why is that property priced so stinking high? Or if you go in and you look at the property, because I had a property I wrote an offer on today, that it was priced right around here. And I go, man, but it was brand new inside. New windows, new HVAC, new roof, new kitchens, new bathroom. And I go, either one of two things typically happen, right? Because pricing is set by really kind of two people. One, the seller, or two, the listing agent. And either both people can be wrong, or their opinions are like noses, right? Everybody has one and they stink. And there's another version of that's a little bit more crass. All right, so I go, man. What's interesting about this chart, I don't even have to step a foot in these properties. Now, obviously, I want to, right? I want to dial things down, but intellectually, I know that this should represent, for the most part, the best properties in the neighborhood, and this should represent the worst properties in the neighborhood. So let's just kind of get an idea here. So a couple key concepts. It is inappropriate to evaluate a property at 1,300 square foot along this line and assume that it is of the same price per square foot at the properties up here along the line. What you actually find is that, let me move this line a little bit here. All right, I think that just does a little bit better representation, and that does a little bit better representation. So let's just pick, let me lower it down to this orange one. So you can kind of see it's the same distance between the line here. We have this orange one, we have this one right here, and we have this one right here. So just doing kind of some basic math, if I go, all right, what's 359 divided by 1,700? 359 divided by 1,700. I've got $211 per square foot, okay? So I apologize, I'm doing this live. If I was more organized, I would have done this prior to, like Sean asked me to do, and it would all be here on the chart. Right, Sean?
I did say that.
He did say that. All right. Well, and boom. All right. So this orange one sold or is under contract at $211 a square foot. It does not mean that this is also $211 a square foot. So 320 divided by 1324. 320, boom, 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 divided by 1324. $240 a square foot, or 242. All right, so we're gonna cheat here. Come on. And copy and paste. When I say 240, 241, boom. All right, you come down right there. All right, copy, paste. And then we'll do the calculation right here. All right, so right here we've got 270 divided by 1,024. 270, boom, 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 divided by, shoot, what did I say? 1074? That would be 251. 1024, sorry. See? If I would have done it prior, Sean, wouldn't be making these mistakes live. 264. Boom. All right, and so what's fascinating here, or at least I find it fascinating, is when I'm trying to understand pricing in the neighborhood, the top of the neighborhood, this correlation exists. Now, here's what I think is kind of interesting, is this relationship, not every agent uses this, definitely the consumer doesn't usually use this, and this relationship between square footage and purchase price, top and bottom of the neighborhood, kind of happens intuitively. Agents, when they're running comps and they're saying, hey, here's what I think your house can sell for, are pulling up the houses that are the most like yours, right? Is it a single family? Is it attached? Is it one floor, 2 floors? Is it updated? Is it not updated? And so they probably are pulling 5 or 6 properties around the same square footage as yours, right? But that could be a large number of comps, and they're kind of going, all right, well, how similar, how not similar, what's the client want? And I would be cautious of any agent that's just going to tell you the highest number because, well, they're just trying to win the listing. I want to know, right, whether I'm representing the buyer or the seller, objectively, what is the highest likelihood of something, selling for? And that's really, that concept of likelihood, people don't like that. They don't like that idea because they want to bet. My house is worth $242,000, Dan, because my neighborhood house sold for this. And I go, well, maybe. Let me give you a perfect example. I had a client that was moving from Arizona to here. They sold their house for $1.2 million here. They're moving here to be close to grandchildren. And thank you, Sean. And so you have, they were looking at this property that was 3 doors down from their grandkids. That property was worth substantially more to them because they were moving in next to their family and they could walk across the street and see their grandchildren, right? Now, they valued that home up and above the next highest person. And at this particular point in time, they had like 10 offers on the property. They were willing to waive the home inspection because, hey, I just walked from a 1.2 million cash sale. I've got all the cash in the world. If something breaks, and I remember having this conversation with them, I said, hey, look, it may look like being the most competitive in this situation might be waiving the home inspection. Is that something that you would potentially consider? Because HVAC systems are like 10 years old. They've been decently maintained. They have the maintenance records on hand. However, if they shit the bed the next year, are you going to be upset that you bought this home? And they were like, no. Tell you, if they shit the bed within the first 3 months, don't care. Want to be next to my grandkids. Okay, so for this individual couple, they valued that property at that amount more. The house is worth what someone is willing to pay. It's not what an appraisal says. It's not what the seller wants to sell for. It's not what the buyer wants the seller to sell it for. It's what someone is willing to pay. And in some cases, someone is willing to pay more. Okay, so but if you and I were to go and hire, back over here on the chart, if you and I were to go and hire 10 different appraisers, right, we would get 10 different values. For those at home, I'm going to assume that you know what a bell curve is. So I really wish I could draw on this, Sean. We got to figure out the whole drawing thing because I want to be able to draw. So you have this idea of a bell curve, right? If we were to plot every male on the planet on a chart of height, right, there would be the middle of the bell curve on how many people are between, say, 5, 8, and 6 foot. And then you'd have some outliers like basketball players on the right, and you have some outliers on the left with people who are height impaired. And so kind of the same thing. The houses might be worth here. So what's kind of interesting is, let's just say I have a client that's looking at this property right here. And I go, hey guys, this one's listed for $365. It's kind of towards the top of the neighborhood, right? Obviously there's one up here that sold for more, but they are priced as if they were the best house that ever existed in this neighborhood. Let's say we go and we look at the house and it's not really any better than these two, but it just happens to be the most competitive property. Yeah, they make it look like Chip and Joanna Gaines. Maybe it happens to be in the middle of summer, and 3 people that are interested, their grandkids live down the street or something along those lines. At the first-time home buyer, could you give an example of what the average salary to home price someone in Virginia Beach could afford? I hear you 3 times your salary. That sounds unlikely in today's time. I think 3 is probably going to be shooting yourself a little bit short. I think the better way to do this, and actually, tell you what, I will shift topics just for you there, Anthony. Got you, brother. All right, so we're going to share screen. It's raining hard outside. Can you guys hear that?
I got your screen up there, Dan.
Okay, cool. I want to see here. Boop-a-doop. All right. Because some of this has to do with, like, what are your other debts? Like, if you've got a $1,500 car payment, that's going to make a pretty drastic influence on what you can afford. So NerdWallet is a decent one. Let's see if I can find this one. Affordability calculator. Boop. And boom. So you have what I would say is what the bank might be willing to lend you, and then you have what potentially you're comfortable with, right? Like if you've ever gone to buy a car and you say, hey, I'm looking at buying a car, and you do their financing, they go, well, we can get you into this car over here. It's like $1,700 a month lease, and you're like, nah, dog, I'm not about that life, right? So it really kind of depends. So if I go over here, let's just type in Virginia Beach. And let's say I'm looking at what payment, right? Let's see here. It should show, where is it at? Why is this not letting me do this? Well, I may have lied to you. Where is it? I know that I can adjust income details. Oh, here we go. Boom, income. Right, so let's just say we're at 75. Again, you can type in NerdWallet, affordability, how much can I afford, and you can kind of use this. But if I had 75,000, what are my monthly debts, right? Well, there's a big difference between, say, if I have a paid off car, my kids aren't going to private school, I don't have any child support payments, or whatever it is, whatever your outgoing costs are. Well, at $250 a month of minimum debt, it says, right, based on that type of income, what's down payment? We're going to say, you can go in here and type in down payment. Let's just say $15,000. Okay. And I go, all right, well, based on this, and I'm doing a 30-year term, am I a veteran, which means do I have VA access or not? I'll just put in yes, because we do have a ton of military here. That a comfortable potential mortgage payment would be potentially around $2,000. And based on a couple of other assumptions, that might be a $340,000 payment, right? And that's at 36. So if I go and I go, well, I'm willing to stretch that because I'm willing to go up to 40. Let's say you've got dual income going on, but you're only qualifying for your income, or how aggressive can I be? You might be able to qualify for up to a $500,000 loan, but 40% of your pre-tax income is going towards that housing. And so you may be able to qualify for that from a lender, but it may also be kind of inadvisable for you to be in that position to buy that because such a large chunk of your income is going towards housing. So as a percentage, right, so let me go back down here to income, 75,000, well, 500 divided by 75, let's just see what that is, divided by 75, is 6.6 times, okay? Now that's very aggressive. If I wanted to stay in stretch category, well, let's just say 375,000, boom, 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 375 divided by 75 is 5 times. And I would say somewhere between 3.5 and 5 is kind of normal, depending on the individual and what their goals are, how aggressive they want to be, that type of thing. But if I go down here and let's just say you have $1,200 in monthly debt, whether that's, let's say, school debt, whether that is a big car payment, whatever that looks like, well, that you can see how drastically that decreases what you can afford. Again, if I go and I do the max out on the stretch payment, you might be able to swing the 322. Now, some of this comes down to what are you comfortable with, right? What are you willing to kind of engage with here? And Sean, we are already up on an hour and 10 minutes, so I might have to cut this off and do a part two.
We're getting there.
But I think some of this stuff is just super helpful to go over and try to think through. What I would encourage anyone to do, so let's go back to what I said at the very beginning. Let's talk about like what are some tried and true good things to pay attention to. If you're looking at moving here, yeah, man, totally. Absolutely appreciate Anthony. And if we're going to do this kind of every other week, mostly because I only have so much time. But if you want to hop on again next Wednesday, you can do something live. Or also you can go on the YouTube channel and Sean puts up questions on occasion if you want to have those answered. Or if you'd like a individual consult, there should be a link below in the description to schedule time with me directly if you want to kind of go over some of this stuff. So let's go over some tried and true things. I never want to be in a position, Sean, you can take off the screen and just put it on me. I never want you to be in a position, because before YouTube, before social media stuff, I and my wife built our business off 100% repeat and referral, right? People who said, hey, Dan, we know you, we want to use you. Or they said, hey, you should totally talk to Dan and his team, okay? And the way that you continue to get business like that is by doing right by people, okay? So as long as I feel like I'm giving you proper advice, you can do whatever you want to do. But I personally would rather be in a position with a little more savings than lack of savings, okay? And the reality is when you go from renting full-time, or if you've never owned, to home ownership, there are more costs. There's maintenance. There are repairs. Those things just happen. Toilets break. HVAC units need to be replaced eventually or need to be repaired. Now, when I was a young man owning my first kind of little dinker home, I did all the repairs for the most part. I remember calling out, just as a story here, I remember calling out the HVAC guy. He comes out and he goes, hey, man, I'm just going to be honest with you. On these specific types of calls, the error code that we're getting, we're just supposed to replace the unit because it's actually more, it's way more intensive for us to repair this than it is to replace it. I said, well, what do you think I should do? And he goes, well, if I were you and you're willing to be handy, look up the repair manual online and see if you can fix it yourself. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm kind of a poor Navy dude. I'm going to do this. And so I went and looked up the repair manual, looked at the motherboard, saw the error code, looked it up, did a bunch of YouTube, went on a couple of HVAC forums, and spent the time to do it. Now, my lovely wife went through a couple of days without HVAC because I had to do all that. There'll be help when there's a few weeks. Let's see, we're out there, the areas we're looking for GMP trucks. Hey, man, Gigi, if like I said, if you want to hop on a quick Zoom call before you do that and talk about different areas that you may be interested in, feel free to do it. Again, the link is below it down in the description. I went through the pains of repairing these things myself because I was trying to save money. And so I would encourage you to look at building up that savings before you make the purchase, because you just don't want to be in a position where you have to do that, or you want to have a little extra savings because you can do all your due diligence and something goes wrong. So that would just be like what rule number one for me is have a little more savings than what you initially anticipated. Now, it depends on who you follow. Do you follow Dave Ramsey's advice, Susie Orman? There's a bunch of different quote unquote gurus out there. In my opinion, I think 3 months of living expenses is a really good spot to start. You probably always want to be increasing that, but 3 months of living expenses, man, it just helps you sleep better at night. 2 is when you are buying, much like we saw the affordable stretch or aggressive housing payment. When you are looking at buying, buy well within your budget. You can always go later on in life and get something super nice. Same thing with like buying your first car. Like, why would you go out and get a Lexus lease on your very first car when you're just now starting to make 40 grand a year? Like, bro, you're just asking for pain. You're asking for pain. So just buy well within your budget, especially today, because there is no guarantee that rates are going to come down. I think they're going to come down. I think there's plenty of reasons for them to come down. We weren't able to get to those today on the live stream. But can you afford that payment at 6.25% interest rate? If the answer to that is yes, and rates do come down, dude, awesome, fantastic. We now have an opportunity to lower that payment, and we're in a good position. Extra icing on the cake. We're in a good spot. So I think those are two really good pieces of advice. 3 is if you're moving into a new area, a place you've never been before, you need to do your legwork. Now that might look like coming here for a vacation and spending a week, driving around and looking at different neighborhoods and going back there at 8 o'clock at night and seeing what it feels like. Because I cannot define for you what good neighborhood or safe looks like. I have my background, my history, what neighborhoods I grew up in, what profiles of different people that I'm grew up around and what I'm comfortable with. And I grew up kind of poor in a very mixed neighborhood. And so I'm very comfortable and have done a ton of traveling in total a bunch of different scenarios. But I can't define that for you. I think everybody wants some basic crime data, and you want to look that up. But there's nothing that replaces you being physically in a space. You physically being in a space, your gut tells you, this is not a good spot, or I've found home, man. These are my people. This is where I want to be. And so I would encourage you to come here. If you're up there in the purchase price, maybe you take the time to rent here for a year first. Yeah, is there potentially some opportunity cost by not buying earlier than later? Sure, but the biggest cost of home ownership, I want to admit to it, and a lot of agents don't want to say this, is me. I'm the most expensive because selling is the most expensive part of real estate. And so if I can convince you to buy a house and keep that house for a long period of time, I do nothing but build your wealth long term. And that's what I want. I want your business, your kids' business, your grandkids' business. Because I plan on being in this business for a long period of time, and hopefully I can convince my son and get my daughter to come into the business with me. And I want that repeat and referral business long term. And the only way you do that is by building trust. So if I can convince you to buy a house and hold on to it for a long period of time, and the longer the better, the more wealth you're going to build, and the more you're going to refer me. So that's I'll kind of end on that today, and we'll kind of get a little bit more into where I think the Fed is going, because by next stream, the Fed will have come out with its predictions, and I'll talk a little bit why interest rates ended up where they're at and why I think potentially throughout the year that they could come down even more. That is it for today's stream. Thank you so much for paying attention. It is an hour and 20 minutes. Thanks for staying tuned.